Welcome to EY's Reframe Your Future series. I'm Natarsha Belling, and we'll be delving into the stories of some of our country's most successful and prominent business leaders, all of whom have reframed their futures during their careers and life journeys. We'll also uncover some of the human truths they have encountered along the way, plus their secrets to success and life advice. Our guest today has had 25 years of management experience with roles that include Director of Australian Programs for Save the Children Australia, Victorian Group General Manager at Transurban, where she was responsible for the operations of CityLink in Melbourne, and Deputy Secretary of Customer Technology and Services at Transport for New South Wales. Please welcome Elizabeth Mildwater, Deputy Secretary, Greater Sydney Transport for New South Wales. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us. How are you feeling about the future?
I'm actually incredibly excited. It might sound weird, but I am a person that likes change and likes to look to the future. And I feel like as tough as the last, 9 months have been, and as tough as it will continue to be for some time, it is also mighty exciting. And we're sort of getting an opportunity to, as you say, reframe in a way that maybe we wouldn't. Disruption gives you that opportunity like no other. We can do stuff in quick time that would have maybe taken decades to do before. So, yeah, I'm actually pretty excited.
Some may say you have one of the toughest jobs in the country right now with Transport for New South Wales, seeing that it's a great challenge with operating at some circumstances during COVID-19 shutdown at just 50% capacity. Why do you see this crisis as an opportunity, not just a challenge?
There's no doubt it has been a challenge on the operations front, and a little known fact is we've kept our services running at 100%, as in all services running from throughout the whole crisis. That's an enormous testament to our frontline staff and their management, and just thousands of decisions and actions every day to keep customers and our communities safe. But the opportunity is the stuff we've learned over the last so many months in so many ways. I mean, every business has had to send people home, and we're like everyone else. We have almost 30,000 staff, and we were really wrestling with flexibility in that environment, with a lot of frontline work. But we suddenly realised, 10,000 staff could work from home. In a matter of days, we moved to that, whereas before that we thought that was just impossible. And now we're hearing that a lot of them would like to continue to work from home, maybe not all the time, 2 or 3 days a week, but, we've learnt that we can do it and they like it, so how do we bottle that? In terms of the actual travelling public, goodness me, we've seen just an outbreak of local community spirit. People staying in their communities have started riding bikes and walking in a way that you could only dream of. We would love to get people out of their cars, back onto their feet, riding bikes, using public transport, but out of their cars. And they've done that in large numbers. You couldn't buy a bike in Sydney, back in March, April. It's actually, it's quite amazing to see. So if we can, capture some of that and keep it going even once life starts taking its new form, I'm just incredibly excited about what the future looks like.
What lessons have you learnt from this crisis? Because I understand in your position it's all about planning, especially in such a major city with infrastructure.
Yeah.
I understand that you planned for this type of scenario back in 2016.
Yeah, maybe not exactly the scenario. Governments do pandemic planning. We don't. That's not sort of what we planned for. But back in 2016-17, we did some work called Future Transport. And we did it in a very different way instead of sort of old-fashioned transport planning way. What we did is we went out and we talked to lots of people in lots of communities across the state. And we actually asked them what they wanted from their communities and therefore what we needed to provide with transport. And so some of the stuff we heard, we then sort of worked about, we don't know exactly what the future looks like, but we worked out some scenarios of how travel might change. And it ranged everything from it actually won't change, car will still be king, even if they're autonomous, everyone might still have a car, through to the absolute opposite extreme where no one will travel at all because technology has meant you can do anything from anywhere. We never actually thought that any of the scenarios we had would play out in purity. And in fact, I did a presentation, it was late February, I think. I was talking to a big group of women and talking through those scenarios, and somebody said to me, Elizabeth, wouldn't that be a terrible scenario if no one travelled anymore, we didn't see each other? How lonely would that be? We can't let that happen. And then it was about 2 weeks later it happened. So we actually have got a glimpse of what life would be like if no one travelled at all. I'm not suggesting that's not going to be the future, but if we can, again, capture some of that, the load it takes off our transport system, it might sound weird, a transport person wanting to reduce the load, but that's absolutely what we would like to do, because then we can put the money into something else. If we don't have to keep building lots of new infrastructure, the money can be used for other things. So, yeah, we've actually learnt we can do a lot more, I think, as a human race and as a city than we ever thought we could.
This series is all about reframing one's future. In regards to what the future may look like, do you think we will ever return to a situation what we saw pre-COVID-19 with transport, or do you think that is forever gone?
It's a really good question, isn't it? And I guess we ponder this a heck of a lot. I suppose the place I always start in answer to this question is we're actually an enabler. It's not for us to sort of be saying what transport should look like. What we need to know is, what does Australia need? What does New South Wales need? What does Sydney need? And then we build to and act to support that. Of course, we want to push people in a certain direction. So the stuff we look at is like what's happening with population. Where will our population now grow? We had tons of statistics and predictions, and they're now being revised because people are choosing to move to perhaps rural areas who we thought might build houses in Sydney, that sort of thing. Even within Sydney, you might see people feel like actually they could live further away rather than needing to live close in because they don't need to travel every day. So they're the sort of things we watch, and then we will adjust our projects and our build after that. I think one of the other key things is people are going to want to travel at different times of day. Yes. People don't all want to do that peak hour in out anymore. I don't think we'll ever go back to that, and that's actually pretty exciting while challenging as well. It means we have to adjust our services to run at perhaps higher levels during the middle of the day, later at night, maybe earlier in the morning, so that people can move around out of peak. We had already started that, but I think that may go to another whole level. Again, the opportunity in that is you don't have such crowded services in a short period of time. You have people travelling more evenly throughout the day.
Surely, Elizabeth, in regards to that a lot of your planning would now be forced into consumer-driven experiences or outcomes. The fact of knowing, especially with women, I know you've focused on if they are travelling at different times with shift work, that safety is a big priority. Yeah. And technology allowing consumers to tell you what they need.
Yes. So technology has been quite a theme for us, again, from about 2016. We also came up with a technology roadmap then, and we are revising it now. But safety in particular has been one of the key focuses. What is a little known fact, we have sort of 30,000 cameras on our bus network and another 10,000 on our train stations. And these are all for security reasons, people can see. But what's now possible using AI, for example, is to watch them more closely so that we can identify security incidents faster and act on them.
And also talking about opportunities, especially for the future, Elizabeth, I understand there's also been a great opportunity with sharing this knowledge of what we're experiencing right now internationally, knowing what worked in Paris, what didn't work in the US. Is that something that really excites you as well, sharing that knowledge and working out what works and doesn't work?
Yeah, it does. And I've only been in the public transport world for sort of 3.5 years, but I have found it the most generous world to work in. People are all motivated by the right thing. We love the transport, but we love it for what it does for people. And so the sharing across the planet really is always good, but I feel like it's kicked into another whole level. And so, I looked at the Paris teams run seminars, London, other places. I've attended workshops for an American transport system where they got us in from over the world to help work on their problem because you can do it by Zoom. But it's just so inspirational hearing what other people have tried, and they tell you straight up what their challenges have been. And it also makes you feel, it's not so bad. I'm facing the same stuff as them, and we can share learning. So hopefully we don't all do the same thing. We try different things and swap learning so the world can sort of go faster rather than each city by itself.
Elizabeth, for you with your career, you've been able to successfully jump and have great success across a range of industries. What drives you? What do you feel your purpose is? Because passion and purpose is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I guess I never really thought I had a career. I started off in law, but I didn't really want to do law. I quite literally I wanted to be an economist, but a friend in the senior study at high school said to me, that's a bit soft. You can't just do economics. So she said, tick the law box as well. Okay. So that's literally how I got into law. I got a job, but I knew there were people much more suited to law than me. But nevertheless, I did it for about 20 years. And the reason I kept at it, I guess I found myself in infrastructure companies, like delivering water services in less developed countries and places where I saw people really challenged with day-to-day living. And I realised that was probably what drove me. We call it now in transport the greater good concept. We use that a lot, but I sort of in hindsight realised I was quite driven by that from early on. Money never really did it for me. It's not that I don't like money, but I often felt a bit sort of empty if I felt like I was just doing a role for the pay. It needed something more. And so it's probably no surprise that I ended up in government. It took quite a long time for me to get there. But in every role that I was doing, it was the sort of greater good piece of it that really drove me. So that's the common thread, even though I've zigzagged all over the place. And I've done stuff that I liked. I always say that to people. If you can't be really motivated by what you're doing at work every day, well, you really do need to think about something else, don't you? Because it's what we do.
It's what you love.
And it's what you do every day. So, yeah, that's probably the common theme.
And I read before in an article that what drives you to change careers often on a completely different path is that you are often sold a vision by someone running a company.
Yeah.
How important is that? And I heard you also say to a lot of people with career advice, just say yes to every opportunity and think about it later.
Yes, I have done some things that people probably would think crazy in hindsight, but I do really recommend it. Again, because I never really had this idea that it was just up, or it was one discipline. And so at times I've sort of really just chucked all the cards in the air and thought, I've had some long breaks, so I've just gone travelling. And then I've just started meeting with people and applying for things. And it's almost inevitably the leader that I meet and the vision they sell me about where they want to take a place rather than the job specifically. So I have taken a few roles where I've sort of thought, I'm not actually sure what the job is, but the person who recruited me has literally said, look, this is my vision for the company. If you'll go with me, I see you as part of it. I'm not too sure, take this role and something else will come. And it's worked every time. It's whether it was Transurban, Save the Children, or what I did in Malaysia, very different organisations, but it was always the vision of what they had planned for the future and the way they were able to describe that. So it wasn't necessarily about the now. In fact, it was usually not the now because there was always a bit of a challenge. When I joined Save the Children, the vision was that I would triple the size of the organisation within 3 years. Now, most people would think that was nuts. But that's the challenge. That was the challenge.
Did you achieve that?
Yeah, pretty well.
Wow.
Well, I actually looked at it and thought, it's eminently doable. And it wasn't about money, obviously. No. It was about the size of the good we would be delivering. It can't be just same old, same old. It needs that challenge as well, but challenge in a good way, to do something that I think is really worthwhile.
And talking about Malaysia, is it true you applied for that job thinking it was in London, but you only realised after saying yes that it was in Malaysia?
Yeah, well, I did know before I actually accepted the job, but I got asked to go in for a role because I had resigned the one I was in and I was living in Manchester and I had 6 months notice period. So, I got told about this great job in London and I actually wanted to live in London. I thought I liked Manchester, but I thought London would be better. And, then I got a phone call saying, there's been a horrible mistake. It's actually in Malaysia. But again, I met the people and I really, really resonated with what they wanted to do. It was a company called PowerGen, which had been government-owned and then listed in the UK. They were a relatively small, nimble organisation and they were setting up in Asia and wanted a general counsel for the Asia-Pacific region. But I really liked the people. I liked the idea that it was almost a start-up, even though it was part of a big UK company. And I also at that time thought, well, gosh, it's halfway home. It's halfway between Australia and it was as scientific as that. And I loved it. I got to Malaysia, I could have lived there forever. I was actually got to the other side that I was really disappointed to leave. But it might sound sort of nuts in hindsight, but no, it paid off.
Saying yes to great opportunities.
Yeah, I think we're really good at talking ourselves out of stuff. And I often say I think women are particularly good. We look at a job description and we see all the things we can't do rather than I say to them, do you want it? Is there anything in there you can do? Where's your strength? Well, give it a crack. You do much better at a job where you're stretched than if you're doing a job that you sort of tick, tick, tick every line and know you can do it. So, yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah.
And talking about diversity, Elizabeth, I was reading also, which I think is such a great initiative, that you're very strategic with recruitment, having a 50-50 ratio. Explain about that for us.
Yeah, so Transport has, as like the whole of New South Wales Government, we've been aiming for diversity for quite some time, and government loves metrics and measurements, so we do have lots of targets. We were doing it sort of with various sort of softer measures, all learning about inclusive leadership and that's all very important. It's really good foundational stuff. But you need some real hard instruments as well, I think, is what I would suggest. Because particularly if you're trying to turn a really big organisation around and very technical as well. So this, I know mining companies and others have grappled with the same thing. If you've always recruited on the basis of the specific skills for a specific role and experience in that role, well, no surprise you're never going to get new people, are you? Because if the job requires 30 years of experience doing the same thing, then you just get the same. And I'm not in any way saying there's anything wrong with experience, but if you're trying to get diversity, you at some stage have to change the selection criteria. And so the 50-50 rule, it's an if not, why not for us. If you don't have a 50-50 shortlist, it has to come up through your Deputy Secretary, so I would have to support it, and then I have to take it to the Secretary to advocate. So it's quite a thing. I knock back, I don't actually get that many now. So you find out at the start,
yes,
you do get some, and you get them because people say, oh, well, we need this skill, and we've advertised and we don't get any women. So then you challenge, do you actually need that particular skill? Where did you advertise? And so you need to challenge all of those things because there's a lot of things built into job descriptions that you actually don't need. And that's just because we've always used same old, same old. So once you start challenging those things, sometimes when I challenge those, it actually goes away and never comes back because they go away and they think, actually maybe we need something different for that role. Then they advertise it again in a different way. And guess what? You get a great pool of 50-50. And so it goes deeper than just that. So it starts off as that blunt thing. But after a while, people genuinely, they don't want to come up and ask for permission from the DepSec and then they just don't want to do that. And they'll do it to start off with, but then they start realising, oh, yeah, maybe we could look at it differently. And it might take a bit of time, but I tell you, the requests drop off dramatically after a while.
And is it true that once there was a circumstance or an example where you rejected, it didn't meet the 50-50 rule, and then they went back and you came back with a stellar list of candidates?
Yes. And a very different list too. So, yeah, we have to challenge every step in the chain. Sometimes it's just because a manager's busy, so they pull off an old position description. Sometimes it's the recruitment team, internal, external, whatever. They've used a sourcing method, go to LinkedIn or whatever. But we need to challenge everything because LinkedIn is promoting people that are already in roles. So that's great, but you need to sometimes actively source. And again, to the thing that women can often sort of not be as good at putting themselves forward, you need to actually really sometimes go and tap good people on the shoulder and say, have you thought of giving this role a crack? And so it sometimes takes a bit of work, but it's always worth it. And probably the lesson I learned earliest was actually not in relation to gender recruiting, but it was I was in a corporate services role and I was deeply impacted by a man who's in a wheelchair and with decades of experience managing big projects in part of our cluster. And he came to me and we were doing a recruitment review and he wanted to see me personally. And he came in and he explained to me how many project management jobs he'd applied for and not even got shortlisted. Oh. And why that was because it was a standard thing in our PDs back then that you had to have a certain qualification that said you could go out on site, a white card. And a lot of project management jobs do not need that, but it was just built in as a standard pull-down PD. So when recruitment teams do their sift against the criteria, he was getting knocked out every time and not getting a look in. And so that actually gave me much more insight than I had before about you need to go deep. And sometimes it's unthinking. The discrimination can be unthinking. A manager would probably have been horrified to know that was happening. And so now I think we're getting much smarter at looking at that detail.
And it's important, that's a great example of why we need different voices at the decision-making table.
Yes, because if we're all the same, we would never have known that Like, there was no one around our executive table that had lived that experience. So if he had not had the courage to come and see me and tell me that. So we've done a lot of deliberate things like that too, where as part of the Male Champions of Change, our secretary, other senior male leaders have actually gone and sat down with groups of people all over the state and listened to their stories as carers or whatever. They've sort of grouped them in small groups and heard their first-hand experience, and then we can bring that back and address it, because you can't pretend to know, it doesn't matter how inclusive you are if you haven't lived that experience. You just don't know what you might be doing that is completely unintentional.
Elizabeth, we're talking also about great leadership qualities. What do you think you bring to the decision-making table as a great leader? What are some of the things that drive you?
Wow, that's a difficult question. I think more recently I've been described as innovative, but I've never really thought of myself as that. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was actually really lucky enough to do a course at Kellogg University. And now that might sound weird because that's in Chicago, but that's another advantage of COVID. They've had to completely tilt. And so I did night shift. I attended their classes at night. And I guess I learned more about leading and sustaining a culture of innovation. And so I guess I learned I learned the theory about some of the stuff that I've always believed in. But I guess some of the key things they sort of told me were, being an innovative leader means not necessarily having the ideas yourself. It's about making the space for those ideas to flourish and then encouraging them. So stuff that I guess I've always thought, but this really put the theory around, things like creating a culture of praise, like really praising people when they do good stuff, or even praising a step in the process if the result might not be what we all wanted, but they've done the right thing and we've learned by it. Like, so really praising, holding the space open for people to come up with good ideas. Obviously in transport you have to be absolutely focused on getting the execution and the delivery right. But again, it's about making sure you've got all the pieces in place. Stuff will happen, stuff does happen. But as long as it's intelligent mistakes, not, one's own goals.
Yes.
It's sort of that type of thing that I guess I like to focus on. I just get so excited when I see good people do good stuff. You know what I mean? That's what really excites me. So I don't know how you describe that, but I think most leaders of large numbers of people would do that too. There's nothing that excites me more than seeing particularly large numbers of people turn and face a challenge and really rise to it. So COVID again it's just been awe-inspiring seeing what our staff have done. And we didn't have to tell them. We obviously provide the environment, we address the questions as they come up because they have lots of questions, lots of concerns about safety. But then you go to the front line and see what they're doing every day and just think, oh my God, it's
I was
amazing.
going to ask you that question, that I was reading in an article that you are greatly inspired every day by the extraordinary efforts of your frontline staff.
Yeah.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, look, I do. I find like that is what inspires me. And frontline can be lots of different things. For us, it's obviously the bus drivers and the train drivers and the customer service staff. It's also the people out on projects. It's the people door knocking when we have to acquire someone's property. It can be the people processing all the leave and health requests from all of our staff because of COVID, whatever. I just find it, it's inspirational. Like, they, again, do their job because they really, really believe in it. We have lots of people who could probably earn more money doing something else somewhere else, but they don't. They come to work every day motivated by what, that bit of what they're doing is so important. And so if ever I start to lose energy or whatever, I just go out and sit with them. And if you ask people to explain their jobs, they're so proud.
And passionate.
And it just gives you like an injection of adrenaline that you can go back out and you think, yep, I'm here for them to make sure I give them the best environment, best support, best leadership. That just keeps you going. So, I try to be deliberate and get out on a site or out somewhere a few times a week if I can, even if it's just me privately travelling on the
Staying
network.
connected.
Yeah.
For you also with trust. Trust is a big element. Trust with your staff, that the staff trust you, that you trust your customers. How important is trust for you with leadership at the moment, especially in what some may say are challenging times?
It's absolutely essential, but it's also one of the really interesting things I think we've seen this year. I mean, trust, no secret. If you'd asked people last year, is trust in government high, low, medium? Trust in institutions generally was pretty low. But we've seen that actually rise and rise in New South Wales in particular. I'll speak about through the early months of COVID. We actually had a lot of trust from the general public. And I think we were constantly trying to find out who are they listening to, because we needed to get messages. And those daily briefings, like from our chief medical officer, from the Premier and that, people were listening, weren't they? And so we, as a government, messages could get across about health and safety and all of that, and people listened. It's the same internally. So we've run, our secretary has run, I don't know, he's probably up near 100 live streams over the last however many months, ranging from stuff we would normally do, all of us with a few hundred or whatever, to actually, I think we got 7,000 on one, and just continuously trying to let people have access to leaders, ask us questions, because the more transparency we can give them, and the more, we don't always know the answer, but if they feel like we're well-intentioned, that we're trying to get them the answers, we've just really tried to double down on that trust. We have a 5 ways of leading thing that's not just on the wall, it's how we generally try and do stuff. And caring and courageous are 2 of those 5 ways, and we've just doubled down on those in the last 5 months. We have a doctor who was, he was our Trains doctor. Sydney Trains, been with us for a long time, but as soon as COVID hit, he sort of stepped up and he's become the face of COVID across the transport cluster, and our staff just trust him. He's almost a rock star now. The information they're getting outside can be really quite bamboozling, but he's able to translate it into what it means for a train driver or a bus driver, or, to be honest, for people like me, I listen to him and I'm like, wow, is that what that means? So that, they trust him. And so it's come to a whole new level everywhere. We need to keep that going, I think. We've built really good relationships with unions as well, in a way that was probably not possible pre-COVID, because I think we're all focused on keeping our staff safe. So, there's something there we want to keep going. I'd like to think we can keep the high levels of trust in government going.
Elizabeth, for you with trust, it's very important at the moment for, I guess, Australians to trust government for organisations, especially when it comes to issues like cybersecurity threats. How much of a big issue is that for you at the moment?
Well, I think it's been there for quite a few years now. We started a cyber uplift program, as we call it, about 4 years ago. I think all businesses have been aware of it for quite a few years. In fact, any organisation that says they're not under some sort of attack at some time is probably just doesn't know about it. But for us, we realise the sort of double importance. We hold a lot of people's data, and it is, as you say, it's a big part of the trust in government. People want to know when they give us their information, we'll look after it. So we take it pretty seriously, and we're constantly uplifting our capability. The other side for us is we have real live operational assets that, the world of operating trains and stuff now is not as it once was. They're not steam trains, they're not people just running them with spanners, and that a lot of it is computerised. So our operational systems need a whole level of protection as well. So we've had to extend that sort of protection into a whole lot of areas that, maybe even 15, 20 years ago you wouldn't have thought of. They were very separate, but now everything is very joined up. Most organisations now, their IT systems would go into pretty well everything they need to do. So a lot of it is about system hardening, but it's also about people, isn't it? We know that a lot of cyber incidents actually come from someone doing something they sort of probably shouldn't have, but they're just human. They clicked on an email or something. We all do it at home. So a lot of our focus has also been on uplifting that human firewall that we call it, teaching people what to watch out for. And that's been really important in COVID, I think, everywhere, because with more people working at home, they don't have necessarily all the safety of what they would have in the office. They don't have the people on hand to ask, is this a good thing or not? So they're making decisions in their own home, in their lounge room or something. So we need to uplift their ability to spot something that might be a bit dodgy and know who to call if they have to.
No IT department.
There is an IT department, but they have to know how to find them. They're not in the same place anymore. So yeah.
In regards to the current situation, where a lot of focus is on the economic recovery, both for New South Wales and across the country, and I guess indeed across the world, what role do you think you're going to play with Transport for New South Wales in that recovery?
So even from day one of COVID, we understood we had a dual role. It was I can honestly say that not even, like, it wasn't even day one that we were just purely on the keep alive sort of thing. We understood we had a dual role about keep the services going, so we're keeping things going and ready for recovery, but very quickly government turned into our role in stimulating the economy. So we were given instructions to pay bills much faster, to bring forward work right from early March. And so that, again, our people have sort of risen to that challenge, and we already had big projects going. We've seen how much work we can bring forward on the existing projects. We started a lot of new work in small projects to try and give small businesses a bit of a crack. But we've also just now also looking forward to see, you will have seen there's been various stimulus packages announced. A lot of that comes from us doing lots of work to see, well, what are we ready to go with that will create jobs and keep going. The focus has been really on the next couple of years because that's clearly the first step out. So we've really been focused on smaller projects that can get going, but there have been some big ones announced too. So there's a bit of a pipeline lined up to hopefully keep the infrastructure part of the recovery going. But transport is always understood its sort of double role here. So we've also kept all of our infrastructure project construction going throughout the crisis, and New South Wales generally has been pretty good at that, whereas in some other jurisdictions they've had to shut down building sites, and that's pretty tough. Not only is it workers losing their jobs, but it's hard to get restarted.
Indeed.
So it's good to keep that going.
Talking about climate change, Elizabeth, silver linings again with what we're seeing, a change in focus in public transport for New South Wales and across the country and indeed across the world. In regards to what you're doing with climate change and focusing on emissions, what are you doing at the moment?
We're really aware that transport is a big contributor to emissions. The New South Wales government set a target of zero emissions by 2050, and so we're looking at, for us, what are the big pieces we can work on. We purchase a lot of electricity, so we're quite actively looking at how we can move to more green energy. Our metro is solar powered, but we're looking at that more generally. But also our buses are where we're really starting to look hard and doing some pretty exciting stuff at the moment. And that's not just for climate reasons. It's, other environment, the health and the nice, making that community feel, again, people want to be able to walk down the street without diesel buses and the noise of diesel buses. So we're actually, our minister has said we will move to zero emissions fleet. We've been running some testing to see what's possible, and we've got some pretty exciting stuff coming through expressions of interest. We actually, as we're doing this, we're in the midst of a virtual couple of months of seminars jointly with an international public transport organisation that are we're working on various problem questions, and I hope to be able to, by November, have answered some of those. But it's already very exciting. We know that we can do about 80% of our Sydney network on electric buses now. They have the range. So it's just about how we build depots, how we source the electricity, make sure it's green electricity, obviously, all of that. We're working with industry pretty closely, but I'm hoping we can completely transform our fleet. It's just a matter of, we can do it. It's a matter of how quickly. So we're looking to be as ambitious as we can.
And what does reframing your future mean to you, Elizabeth?
Me personally?
Yes.
Wow. Now, I guess I am absolutely so excited, as you're probably picking up, about what the future looks like for transport and New South Wales. So for me, it's probably tied in with that. It's quite weird for me because I am, as you picked up, someone who's moved to really different things over time. This is probably the first time in my life where I've actually felt pretty comfortable in terms of the environment I'm in. I can see there's so much change and challenge out into the future that I'm pretty happy where I am, just now absorbing that strategy and leading that forward. So for me, reframing is probably actually, as the role of Greater Sydney DepSec, I think we've got enormous. It's just so exciting to both build a whole new city out west and get the other parts of our, beautiful three cities working properly, but also now to get people out of cars, as I said earlier. I think let's really double down on that and focus on not just building stuff, but also the behaviour change thing, and that for me is mighty exciting. Like, if we can, we're focusing on sort of reducing environmental emissions, getting people on bikes, zero emission buses, that sort of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I can see, a very different place in 5 or 10 years So for me, it's more about reframing that rather than reframing my own career. I mean, you never like to speak too soon, but it is actually the first time in my life I've felt like that. So that's pretty exciting, I think.
I could talk to you all day. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we've loved your passion and enthusiasm and seeing the current situation we're in as much as a challenge, but more importantly, an opportunity for great things ahead. Thanks so much for joining us,
Thank you.
Elizabeth. We hope you've enjoyed our interview with Elizabeth Mildwater, Deputy Secretary, Greater Sydney Transport for New South Wales. Before we go, it's my great pleasure to introduce Neil Johnston, EY Oceania Transport Leader, Government and Public Sector. He's going to talk briefly about some of the key themes during our conversation with Elizabeth that are resonating both here in Australia and around the world. Thanks so much, Neil.
Thanks, Natarsha. 2020 has forced all industries into rapid change. As we adapt to a world shaped by the COVID-19 pandemic, will the future of transport stay on course or change lanes? Two of the areas that we believe will significantly reframe the transport industry are a greater focus on decarbonisation and the impact on mobility resulting from rapid advancements in technology. The recently released EY Megatrends 2020 report suggests a failure to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius will result in wide-reaching economic and social disruptions. While still in its early stages, the decarbonisation of transport provides an opportunity to transition to a cleaner future. By 2050, the percentage of low or zero-emission vehicles in the Australian fleet is forecast to reach up to 60%, up from under 1% today. Increasing demands from the conscious consumer, combined with the opportunity for government and private sector to take advantage of new low or zero emission technology, means that fleet decarbonisation is within reach and will open a new frontier for the transport sector. However, this will only be successfully realised with strategic planning, investment in fleet renewal and charging infrastructure. This is without doubt an exciting time for transport, as we also start to tap into the potential of technology, data analytics, and AI and automation. The way in which leaders respond and the speed with which they embrace these technologies is a generational make or break moment. We continue to see opportunities that technology can provide in shaping future mobility, whether it's through autonomous vehicles or harnessing data and on-demand mobility solutions to improve transport outcomes for both individuals and the transport network. Complicating matters, of course, is COVID-19 and the shifts in how we all live and work and the consequential impact on how people view mobility going forward. One thing we do know is that the boundaries defining our lives are shifting to an extent not seen in generations. The four major components of life's portfolio, work, leisure, learning and retirement, have already been changing in recent years, presaging even bigger shifts ahead. This will result in both challenges and opportunities. The transport industry is uniquely placed to support our changing social fabric. Consider the amount of time the average commuter spends in congestion. Can technology-enabled mobility solutions and autonomous vehicles shape a transport future based on a greater sharing of vehicles and journeys, thereby reducing congestion? More than ever, we believe in the importance of harnessing technology at speed and driving innovation at scale, while ensuring humans are put firmly at the centre of every transformation initiative. So ask yourself, are you reframing your future, or is the future reframing you?
Thanks so much, Neil. We'd love you to join the conversation on LinkedIn. Please feel free to leave your thoughts and comments, and you can head to the EY website to watch the full Reframe Your Future series. We'll see you next time.